Hey makeup friends! I've recently posted a video where I talked about which palette I would declutter from every brand if I had to declutter one of my palettes from them. Today we're going to flip it on its head and I'm going to look at those same brands and I'm going to talk about which palettes I would keep if I could only keep one. Let's get into this. As always, I want to start off by welcoming you back to the channel, or if you're new here, then hello and welcome. My name is Kara, and on my channel we like to mix brains, beauty, and the occasional F-bomb. Also, I'm pretty sure I just mixed up my intro, but we're going to roll with it because another thing we like to do on my channel is just not take ourselves too seriously. So let's move forward. On my eyes today, I am wearing the REM Beauty palette Midnight Snack. That gorgeous like shine that you're seeing is the shade Glow from Clionadh. I did film this entire makeup look. I'm just not sure which order the videos are going to go up in, but there is a video with me creating this look which will be up at some point on my channel. But today we're going to be taking a look at a bunch of different brands and I'm going to be selecting one palette to keep from each. This is purely hypothetical. I'm not actually decluttering all the rest of them, but I'm pretending like I am. So for this video, much like with my other video that I did where I talked about which one I would declutter, I'm only looking at brands where I have at least 3 or more palettes from them, just so that there is a bit of variety. Some of these brands, it was very easy to pick. Some of them, I struggled, and some of them really surprised me. The brands or the palettes that I intuitively thought that I would keep when I really sat down and looked inside and really considered each palette, sometimes those ones didn't actually make the cut. So let's just dive into this. I think I've figured out the alphabet now, so I think we should be able to go in alphabetical order. So up first is Adept Cosmetics. And that's going to be Plain Jane. This one was very easy for me. I freaking love the Plain Jane palette. It ranked #1 out of all the palettes that I tried in, I believe it was 2020, and it's still right up there as well. I just think it's so beautiful. It really is more of like a collection of singles than it is like a complete palette in and of itself because there are no matte shades in here. However, even if I just want to throw in some bronzer into my crease and then use one of these all over my lid, these make for perfect one and done shades as well. They are beautiful. There is a shade for basically any kind of look that you're looking for. Love this palette. I would fight you if you wanted to take it from me. Next up is Anastasia Beverly Hills, and this is one of those brands where I thought I knew what it was going to be, and then I really sat down and looked at them and really considered, and I surprised myself. I thought Sultry would be the hands down no-brainer winner for me, but it's actually Primrose. I don't hear many people talking about this one, honestly, and yet I love it. Like it's so beautiful on the eyes. These blushes over here are gorgeous as well. This one is quite deep on me, but if I mix the two of them together or go in with like a dual fiber brush, I can make it work. But they also work as eyeshadows, so that just helps to round out the rest of the selection that you have going on in here. So Sultry is much more of a cool toned kind of palette. And so when I was really thinking about if I could only keep one, which one would I get the most use out of? This one, Primrose, is really more along the kind of colors that I do gravitate towards on a more day-to-day basis. So while Sultry is beautiful, and it is, this is a gorgeous palette, if I'm sitting down to get ready for, say, work, Primrose fits that better than this one does for me. This one can get very dramatic very quickly. It doesn't have to, granted, but it can. Whereas with this one, I just find that there's a lot more option for day-to-day looks in it. So that ultimately was the kicker for me. That's why I kept this one, but I really did surprise myself because when I sat down to start culling all these palettes out, I really thought it was going to be this one. So it's a very close second, but ultimately Primrose is the winner for me. Then we move on to BH Cosmetics, and I do have an extensive collection of BH palettes, so just picking one was a challenge in and of itself, just because I had so many to choose from. Again, I thought going into it that I knew which one would ultimately prevail, but that was not the one that I ultimately chose. So I thought the BFF palette would be the one that would win out over all the rest. But what actually won was the Lit List. This was the holiday release for 2021. And the reason that I ultimately chose this one over BFF is simply because there's just more options available in this palette. As you can see, there's reds and greens and bright blue. If you haven't seen BFF, let me grab it. There are blues and reds in here as well, but not to the same level of punchiness that the Christmas palette had. So while I do love this palette, and I really, really do, this one I think just has more versatility, and I can still get those nice neutral looks out of here because there are these softer tones and the browns and golds and all that. So really it's kind of the best of both worlds, because this gives me some really bright, colorful options while also incorporating those more neutral, work appropriate options as well. And then Blend Bunny is next. So I do have all three of Blend Bunny's palettes, Surge, Blends, and Dollhouse. It really wasn't that difficult for me to choose because the Dollhouse palette is stunning. The Blends palette I think is an excellent resource to have because there are like basically any color that you want is in there, and it's all mattes, and their mattes are spectacular. But again, if I'm looking at what am I going to use the most, Dollhouse is where it's at for me. I think this is a spectacular palette. I really think it's just this beautiful, neutral, but not boring kind of palette. I think if you wanted to just sort of dip your toe into the world of color, this does offer some options for that. But if you work in a more professional, I always air bunny that, but like professional environment. I'm a lawyer by trade. I can't really wear like a neon cut crease to the office because clients are going to look at me and be like, I don't know that I really trust all my financial stuff with you, you know? Rightly or wrongly, it is sort of what it is. I can't show up at court like that. So these are the kind of palettes that give me a little bit of creativity and a little bit of leeway to go with a touch of color while still keeping it in that more professional world. And I just love the performance of this. I think it's just, oh, I love this palette so much. Colourpop. This is the one that I hemmed and hawed over the most. I had the hardest time, and I almost made an exception for myself to include more than one palette, but I forced myself to choose just one, and I'm still not entirely sure that I'm 100% certain of my choice, but It's a Mood is the one that I pulled out and said this is the one I would keep. Again, it's for the versatility's sake. What it came down to for me was this one, It's a Mood, the Child palette, the Raw Beauty Christie collaboration palette, and there was one, oh, Sandstone, that was the other one. Some of them are a little bit more colorful, some of them are a little bit more neutral, but ultimately there are some just very, very pretty shades in here that I wouldn't want to get rid of. For example, all of these like teal kind of shades in here, I think they are so pretty. But again, I can keep it more safe for work, but I could also play it up if I wanted to. So that was the deciding factor for me with this one. On to Dior then, and I do have three of these 5-pan palettes. The one that I would keep if I could only keep one is Soft Cashmere. This is just one of those palettes that I can just pick up, throw on my eyes. I know it's gonna look beautiful. I know I'm not gonna have to expend a ton of effort to try to blend these shades out, and I can just leave the house. Like, it's not a thought-intensive kind of palette where I have to sit down and think about how I'm going to pair the shades to make them complement each other. I can just grab it and go, and it is beautiful. A lot of times I find that the higher end eyeshadows are kind of lackluster, like they really just play it safe. This one, not the case. These shimmery shadows in here are beautiful, and they are very impactful on the eyes as well. So Soft Cashmere for the win. Next is Gourmand Girls, and I have, I believe, 4 palettes from her, and the one that I love the most and the one that I would keep is this one here, the newest, C'est L'Amour. I just think there's something so very beautiful about this palette, and I really love the way these kind of tones play up the green in my eye. I love the inclusion of that matte black, so you can make it really smoky and dramatic, but you can also play it really light and airy. I think it's a really beautiful palette. I have not experienced any issues with the application of these shades, and this is definitely one that I want to hold on to. Then we move on to Huda Beauty, and again, I do have quite a few of her palettes, although I have decluttered some over the course of the last few years, but the one that really stood out to me is Rose Quartz. I actually did film a review of this, and in fact I did a whole like full face of Huda Beauty, and it's just been sitting in my unedited directory on my computer for like literally 2, maybe 3 months at this point. I started editing it and then stopped and then forgot about it, so I need to go back and finish that. But suffice it to say, this palette is just beautiful on the eyes. In fact, it's much prettier applied than it looks in the pan. The only shade I just can't get behind is that like Petri dish one in the middle. I've mushed it around in swatching so it doesn't look quite as off-putting as it does straight out of the gate, but I don't like the texture of it. It's kind of like that like jelly kind of feel, and I just don't like that. But all the rest of the shades, they like pick up double duty to make up for that one. And this just applies really beautifully, and it is spectacular on the eyes. Speaking of spectacular on the eyes, the Juvia's Place palette that I would keep, I don't even know if you can get your hands on it anymore. This is the Disco Party that they did in collaboration with Fumi, and it is so pretty. It is so beautiful. I don't get a ton of use out of this pressed glitter here, but which shade is it? This one here. Oh, it's so beautiful. It's like this gorgeous gunmetal, glittery, liquid metal situation that just, oh my gosh, it's a showstopper. It's so beautiful. So if only for that shade, I definitely want to hold on to this palette. Next up, we move on to Collidos, and I do have all of their palettes with the exception of one of the Futurism. I can't remember what it was called, but it had all neon shades in it. They don't offer it anymore. That's one that I missed out on, but the palette that I would keep if I could only keep one is Club Nebula, which was done in collaboration with Angelica. This palette is just... Angie knows how to put a color story together. That's all I can say. This is beautiful. I love these deep, rich matte shades that are in here. I love that the shimmers can be layered on top of the mattes to really transform them, but they also wear nice on their own. I love the mix of shades in here. I love just the whole thing. I just love the whole thing. It's a beautiful palette. The Collidos formula is definitely one of my favorite formulas out there. So from a performance aspect, this one's there as well, but there's something special about this one and don't want to see it go for sure. Then we are on to Elle, and I have La Roque up next. The one that I would keep from there is the Fairy Tale Forest palette. This one, I just think it's just a really pretty work palette. Like, you can make it a little bit more dramatic. There are some deeper matte shades in there, but it really lends itself to just playing with those shimmers. And I've said it before and I'll say it again, the shimmers in these La Roque palettes really do come to life when they're applied. In the pan, I mean, it's not like they don't look nice, but they just kind of look meh. Like there's nothing super special about them in the pan, but once they're actually applied, you can really see those different like color undertones coming through, and they're just really, really pretty. They're very reflective. They're very smooth, very easy to work with. So I think this is the kind of palette that you really can't fuck it up. Like, it's really not, again, one of those like labor intensive in the sense that you don't have to sit there and spend a lot of energy trying to figure out how to make it work. You can use any of these mattes, any of these shimmers, they're all going to work well with each other, and you're just going to get consistently pretty looks out of this palette. So that's why I would want to keep this one. And then the other Elle brand that I have is Lunar Beauty. This one was a very, very easy decision for me. This is Moonspell 2, and this color story is just like me in a palette. I love pinks and purples on my eyes. I just think they really bring the green out in my like more hazel kind of eyes that I have. This palette's just absolutely spectacular. Like, it's so beautiful. It's so fun to work with. This like bright, deep cherry red here. They're all beautiful. fucking love this palette. I love it so much. Then we get on to M. I think I forgot to mention Melt in my other video, so let's just quickly decide which one. Well, I know which one off the top of my head. I know which one I would get rid of. It would be this one here, the Radioactive palette. Nothing wrong with it, I just don't use it very much, so if I had to declutter one, it would make sense for me to declutter this one. But I will throw elbows if anybody tries to ever take Morte away from me. I love this so much. It's just so, so beautiful. I really did hem and haw. I looked at this versus the newest one, the Amore Mariposas, because again, that one has more shade options in it, so it is a bit more versatile. But there's just something about this one that I just can't not keep. Even though I don't use it very often, it's spectacular. It's just so beautiful. It's deep and moody, but there's enough brightness there that it's not like overwhelming on the eyes. It's a beautiful, beautiful palette. This is one that they 100% should have kept permanent, but I don't get to make those decisions. Not going anywhere. I will fight for this one. From there, we move on to Natasha Denona, and I did have to pause a little bit to really consider this. It came down to glam versus retro. Ultimately, retro won. I really thought, when I sat down, I really thought that glam would, but it just comes down to the color story again. Glam is beautiful, but much the same as I felt about Sultry, that's how I feel about glam. These are the color stories that I reach for. So the purples and the pinks, I just find them to be very flattering on my eyes, and I do find them to be just that much easier to work with than more deep browns, things of that sort. I don't mind using all neutrals. I do it quite frequently, to be honest, but there's just something about the purple tones that I love, and so retro wins it for me. Now remember like a minute and a half ago when I said that Angelica just has this knack for pulling color stories together? Yep, so Odin's Eye, if I could only keep one, it's going to be Hella. This again, done in collaboration with Angelica, and it's fucking beautiful. It's gorgeous. I'm a broken record at this point. Like, of course, I think these are all beautiful or else I wouldn't be keeping them, you know? There's just something about this one. The greens mixed with the pinks, this really deep, like blackened plum shade, the multi-chrome, like there's so much going on in here. And it's just so beautiful, and it's so nice to work with as well because these mattes are just buttery smooth. The shimmers are so easy to work with and yet so bright and inviting on the eyes. Freaking love this palette. And then we are down to our last three. So up next is Tarte, and this one was difficult for me because I'm trying to pan my Tartelette in Bloom, and I've made really good progress in doing so. So decluttering it now would feel like giving up. But at the same time, because I've made so much progress in it and because I've had it for so many years, I'm then looking at, well, would I want to keep something that's newer? Ultimately, that's sort of what won out. And when I did this exercise, I probably should have said this 15 palettes ago, I wasn't thinking like, okay, well, I'm going to keep that one, so therefore I don't need this one. You know what I mean? Like I wasn't thinking about like the other palettes that I was keeping. I was more so thinking like, these are the three palettes that I have from Tarte. If I could only keep one of them, which would it be, regardless of what else is in the collection? That was sort of how I was approaching it. So this is the one that I chose to keep. So this is the Full Bloom palette. She's a beast. Like there is a lot going on in here, but it's new and it's shiny and it's pretty. And again, these are those tones that I just think make my eyes come to life. So I think this would just be the smarter option for me to keep over Tartelette in Bloom. And then Urban Decay, Wild Greens, which kind of shocked me. I thought it was going to be Naked, not Naked Cowboy, Naked Wild West, but this one I just think I'm going to use more. I did a review on this. I don't think it's incredibly amazing. Like it's nothing really to write home about, but at the same time, it's really easy to throw a good look together for work. And I really didn't have much in the way of complaints about it. I did note in my review that the shimmer shadows in here do stand to benefit from like a glitter glue underneath them because I have experienced quite a bit of fading with them. But if I'm just looking at like ease of application, this one's there. I really don't dislike it, despite the fact that I said some negative things about it in my review. I don't dislike it. And then that brings us to Viseart, and the one that I would keep from Viseart is the Violette Étendue. And there are two very good reasons, well, I guess there's three reasons, but two in specific are this reason right here and this reason right here. These shades are just so pretty and so fun for Viseart. I don't typically think of Viseart as being more colorful. I know they have like the editorial brights and things like that, but a lot of their palettes tend to run on the more neutral side. But including these two shades in here take this palette in particular to the next level. But again, I just like working with this palette and I like how my eyes look when I'm wearing it. So that's why I chose this one. So there you have it, guys. Those are the palettes that I would keep if I could only keep one from each brand. I would love to hear from you. Pick a couple brands. Let me know which ones you would keep. If you agree with me, if you disagree with me, all that good stuff. But for now, I'm going to wrap the video up here. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch. If you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up. And if you're not subscribed to the channel, I ask that you consider doing so. For now, I'm going to say goodbye, and I will see you in my next video. Until then, just be a decent human being. Bye for now.